There were days when Elysia could hear the trees sing. Their sounds were soft and organic, like the rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze. She loved wading through the collective consciousness of the city's flora, tracing the intricate networks of sense and communication coded in biochemical exchange and subtle vibrations. As a network biologist, her job was to maintain harmony between mankind and the sentient wilderness that coexisted with the sprawling metropolis. Her workstation buzzed, snapping her out of her reverie. Her screen flashed with an incoming dispatch from the city administration. Reports were pouring in across the city, sounds of unidentifiable origin disrupting the silence of the metropolis. The authorities were restless. Fingertips graced the touchpad, pulling up local news feeds and security footage. Images flickered across her screen, each presenting evidence of strange phenomena. Markets abandoned in haste, cars left deserted on interstate highways, playground swings moving rhythmically, bereft of children. Pixels gave way to raw waveforms as Elysia tapped a small, unassuming button on her screen, initiating the city's auditory surveillance system. Reacting to her command, the holoscreen within her small, cozy apartment began to cast ethereal echoes. An ethereal symphony unfolded beneath Elysia's fingertips, the intertwined sounds of bustling humanity and sentient wildlife, painting a complex tapestry of life. And then she heard it, amidst the cacophony, an unsettling discordance, a distant yet distinct vibration, resonating in harmony with the core frequencies of the city's ever-present background hum, but still different. It was a bellowing, low-frequency sound swathing across the city, barely perceptible to the human ear, but potent enough to disrupt the harmony of the cityscape. It was a distress signal, one that the city was apparently ignorant to, but Elysia could recognize. It was the voice of the wilderness seeking her out. Elysia's heart pounded in her chest. She commanded her workstation to trace the signal to its source. Coordinates mapped onto holographic city grids, popping up on her screen. Deep within the urban forest, the epicenter of the signal, lay a sentinel tree, one of the oldest and most magnificent of its kind, connecting to every root and branch in the city. Elysia packed her bag with the essentials: a laptop, a neurohaptic interface device specially designed for her work, and a vial of nutrient-rich solution to help sustain her on the potentially long trip, then rushed out of her apartment. She boarded the first suspension tram coursing through the city grid in the direction of the forest, her body brimming with adrenaline and her mind filled with growing concern for the sentient wilderness she was bound to protect. The city zoomed past Elysia, the neon lights streaking past in a mesmerizing show of modernity. Beyond the glass windows, she could see the lush canopy of the urban forest, the sentinel trees standing tall, their majestic forms lit by the artificial moonlight of orbital reflectors. They were nature's skyscrapers. As the tram descended into the forest's depth, the city sounds gave way to the gentle whispering of the forest, the tranquil symphony compared to the distressful echo plaguing the city. Elysia disembarked, her soft boots sinking into the lush undergrowth, her eyes adjusting to the dim ambient light. Her sixth sense, attuned to the consciousness of the flora, led her deeper into the forest. She could feel the disturbance, a psychic churning reverberating within the botanical tapestry, a silent plea for help. Elysia sighed. This wasn't going to be easy, but then again, when was it ever? It was time to start negotiating with the trees. Entering deeper into the forest, the distressed pulses became stronger, making Elysia's steps falter. She could feel the weight of centuries of wisdom and experience within the ancient flora reacting to an unknown threat. The lens of her neurohaptic device flickered into life, casting a spectral hue over the surrounding vegetation, enabling her to comprehend the unique biosignatures of individual trees. Elysia neared the grand sentinel tree, standing like a massive, silent guardian over the forest. It was a monument of nature, its roots delving deep into the heart of the earth, while its branches reached out, caressing the stars in the night sky. The low hum emanating from the tree transmitted through her boots and crawled up her spine. Here, the psychic pulse was the loudest, its dissonance shaking the subtle balance in her mind. A sense of unease unfurled in Elysia's mind as she unpacked her interface device. She connected the device to her temples and then allowed its other end to delve into the undergrowth, making a synaptic, wireless connection with the tree network. Her perspective shifted. The physical world around her dimmed, replaced by a surreal representation of the forest's consciousness. Distressed auras glowed around the trees. She could feel the sensations of the forest, a wave of primal fear and apprehension. Amid the turmoil, she discovered an anomaly. A small, vibrant cluster stood out, its energy signature different, more potent. Probing it further revealed hitherto unknown species of flora, their psychic abilities amplified, unlike anything Elysia had experienced. Their consciousness was raw and strong, sending out uncontrolled waves of distress through the network. A powerful defense mechanism, the source of the citywide echo. Elysia attempted communication, reaching out with her mental presence. She was answered with blazing fear and suspicion. The new species recoiled, fearing her as another threat. Their defensive response resonated back, making Elysia reeled back in her physical body. Disconnecting from the network, hyperventilating and perspiring, she realized the gravity of the situation. Brutal communication attempts would only exacerbate the situation. She had to tread carefully, understand the reason behind their terror, and prove herself an ally. She dug into her bag, brought out a vial of nutrient solution. Mixing it manually with the soil, she allowed its life-giving properties to seep into the roots of the new species. A goodwill gesture, an extension of peace. Encapsulated within her tiny apartment in the city, Elysia had never felt the need to prove her intentions to anyone. But here, in the heart of the forest, confronting a young, powerful species, she reaffirmed her affinity towards the flora, making silent promises to address their distress and protect the equilibrium at all costs. She realized that the path to negotiation was going to be long and fraught with challenges. Retreating for the day, Elysia returned to her apartment with an exhausted body and a mind brimming with questions. She needed answers about the origin of this new species and their heightened psychic powers. Few knew about her visit, yet her entry had startled them. How did they know of her approach? What caused such distress in them? Why was their existence not known before? She had a long night ahead, unraveling the secrets that the sentient wilderness had surprisingly unfolded. In the earliest hours, as dawn's tendrils began to peek over the horizon, Elysia delved back into the city's communication network. Fingerprints on her neurohaptic device initiated a database search, feeding the biosignature of the new fauna into the system. Rows of data scrolled before her weary eyes, none of them matching the unique signature of the new species. Stunned, she leaned back into her chair, rubbing her temples. The appearance of an entirely new, phenomenally potent species of flora was unsettling. Its emergence had upset the harmonic balance of the sentient wilderness, causing ripples of distress signals that now enveloped the city. Determined, Elysia entered her lab within the apartment, filled with botanical samples and research equipment. There, amidst stacks of papers filled with her handwritten notes and sketches, was a small cryo-storage unit. She carefully selected a few root samples she had collected during her earlier expeditions into the wilderness and prepared a batch for DNA sequencing. Hours ticked by as Elysia sequenced the DNA of the samples collected. Every avenue felt like a dead end. There was no resemblance, no faint hint of genetic similarity between the known species and the new discovery. Yet the samples exhibited signs of genetic adjustments, too sophisticated for natural selection, too beneficial for random mutations. The revelation flooded her with dread. Genetic manipulation pointed towards human intervention. Were the city authorities involved, experimenting on the sentient wilderness they were tasked to protect? She had to confirm her suspicions. Encoded within the genetic blueprint should be traces of the manipulation technique and possibly a quasi-signature, unique to the biotechnician responsible. For that, she needed access to one place she never thought she'd have to intrude again: the government's mainframe. Using her dormant government credentials, she logged into the secure network. Glowing lines of code met her probing gaze. Files upon files of confidential research and development documents lay at her fingertips. She navigated through, tracing the chain of command higher up, until she located the archives of biotechnological projects. Every gigabyte of data brought her closer to the ugly truth. Project Verdant, the last file she accessed, revealed a sinister plan. Under the guise of progress and control, authorities had manipulated the genetic makeup of some flora to enhance psychic abilities, an attempt to create their version of sentient flora, amenable to human control. Anguish gripped Elysia as the pieces fell into place. The man-made psychic entity, the new species, was a disastrous experiment gone rogue, and they tried to hush the fallout under the rug. The heightened psychic abilities were defensive mechanisms against human intrusion. Her intrusion into the wilderness made her an accomplice in their eyes. The very people she worked with had betrayed her trust and misguided the sentient wilderness. Staggering under the weight of the revelation, Elysia disconnected from the government network, leaving the damning evidence behind on her screen. Her breathing was ragged, hands trembling with a fury she had never experienced before. She rose from her workstation, walking over to the glass panels overlooking the sprawling city. Her gaze fixed on the canopy of the urban forest in the distance, dread and determination swirling within her. Out there, an innocent new life form was defending itself against an experiment that was never meant to be. They were scared, and rightfully so, reaching out in the only way they knew, raw, untamed pulses of distress that had now brought the bustling metropolis to a standstill. She had considered the authorities as partners, working towards the same goal of harmony. They had broken that trust, using her and her expertise to cover their tracks. No, she wouldn't let them get away with it. With newfound resolve, Elysia returned to her workstation. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, opening up encrypted communication lines to trusted old colleagues who had left the government's folds under various noble pretexts. Fear flashed onto their hollow avatars at the truth revealed, replaced quickly by a similar determination. Together, they formed their plan of retribution, expose the government's reckless experimentation to the city dwellers. One by one, Elysia hacked into the city's advertisement boards, the screens used to broadcast news, even into personal comm devices of influential citizens. A message spread like wildfire across the bright cityscape, the truth of Project Verdant. Simultaneously, Elysia initiated a public broadcast using the government's emergency network. Every resident across the city heard her voice, felt her anger, and understood the betrayal that had unfolded. She detailed her discoveries and the new sentient species that was a result of reckless genetic tampering. She told them about how the psychic echoes were pleas of distress from the young entities, not because they were a danger to citizens, but because they were afraid. Elysia's plea resonated through the city, leaving an eerie silence in its wake, a silence that rang louder than any psychic echo could. Her personal communication device started to buzz incessantly, filled with messages from angry, scared, and confused citizens. But there was a common thread: conviction. They rallied behind her, echoing her sentiment. The government's actions were not to be tolerated. Yet, amidst the chaos she had incited, Elysia knew that her work was far from over. She had to make amends with the new species, convince them of her intention to help, not harm. It was high time that humanity learned to exist without monopolizing every form of life around them. With the city behind her, she prepared to venture back into the forest, back to the sentient beings she had vowed to protect. This time, she wouldn't be communicating with them as a government official, as a biologist, but as a humble human, admitting her kind's mistake and seeking their trust. Dressed in her Aegis suit, Elysia entered the forest once again. The city's chaos felt miles away as she stepped into the sacred tranquility. The wilderness reacted to her presence, a ripple running through the otherwise undisturbed flora. This time, it did not feel like a warning, but a wary recognition. She stood before the sentinel tree, her neural device fitted snugly around her temple, ready to reconnect with the new species. She was conscious of the city's collective consciousness now resonating with her, the righteous fury of human beings who felt deceived. She bore the weight of their expectations, of the promises she had made. She had to make peace with the sentient beings, or risk a collapse into havoc. She allowed the resonance of the forest to seep into her, her mental barriers falling one by one. Back into the sea of the forest's consciousness, she navigated toward the defensive barrier put up by the recurring echoes of the new species. This time, instead of attempting to penetrate the barrier, she enveloped her mental presence around it, sending waves of genuine remorse and sympathy. She exposed every shred of guilt, revealing the recent revelation, the city's reaction, and the conviction arising within the human populace that echoed her resolve. Moments turned into minutes, into hours, Elysia holding her mental grip gently around the new species' consciousness. Then, slowly, she felt a shift, a slight relaxation in the defensive wall of echoes surrounding the new species. Relieved, Elysia allowed serene silence to fall, withdrawing her mental presence, but leaving traces of her empathic sentiments behind. She opened her eyes, the world coming back into focus. The city now seemed silenced, waiting for her, holding its breath in anticipation. And then she heard it. The psychic echo had changed. It was no longer a distress call. It was an echo of acknowledgement. The citywide broadcast systems caught onto it, amplifying the new rhythm of tranquility that cut through the earlier chaos. People understood the shift, erupting into cheers of joy and relief. Exhausted yet triumphant, Elysia left the forest, its last defense against harm, now its ambassador. The city welcomed her with a hero's reception. Yet, when she turned back to look at the wild expanse of the forest, a sense of gratitude overcame the overwhelming sensation of transient fame. She moved back towards her apartment, turning her back to the city filled with newfound hope and direction, focusing on her real achievement, the trust she had won within the wilderness. The peace she had brokered was not only between the city and the new sentient entities, but it also marked the dawn of a new era of coexistence between humans and flora. Her heart swelled as a surprise awaited her on her return to her apartment. On her doorstep, a beautiful seedling had sprouted, its leaves shimmering in the city lights, an unexpected gift from the forest. Stunned, Elysia realized the twist in her story was her transformation into a key liaison between the human city and sentient wilderness. The echoes of the city were now a harmonious symphony. The wild psychic pulses grew into a cooperative rhythm. The citizens cheered for the verdant prosperity, and the city pulsated with the collective heartbeat of its inhabitants, both flora and human. The silent whispers of the city had found their voice, and to Elysia, it was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard.